When Dr. Sarah Mitchell became Boston's most beloved veterinarian, pet owners trusted her with their animals' lives. But when her fentanyl addiction and insurance fraud consumed her, she began euthanizing healthy pets for organ harvesting and murdering owners who discovered her crimes, turning animal hospitals into death chambers. Before starting the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, let's get back to the video. The crisp New England autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as Dr. Sarah Mitchell prepared surgical instruments and arranged medication vials for what would become the most dangerous veterinary procedure of her 16-year career as Massachusetts's most respected small animal veterinarian and emergency pet specialist. At 42 years old, Sarah had established herself as Boston's premier veterinary professional, specializing in advanced surgical procedures and exotic animal care that attracted wealthy pet owners, celebrity clients, and animal rescue organizations who valued her medical expertise and her reputation for saving animals that other veterinarians had declared hopeless cases. Sarah's veterinary clinic occupied a state-of-the-art medical facility in Boston's affluent Back Bay district, featuring advanced surgical suites, specialized imaging equipment, and intensive care units where critically ill animals could receive round-the-clock medical attention from qualified veterinary technicians. Her clientele included prominent business executives whose expensive purebred dogs required complex medical procedures, entertainment industry professionals whose exotic pets needed specialized care, and wealthy families whose beloved companion animals represented substantial emotional and financial investments that demanded the highest level of veterinary expertise. The interior of Sarah's clinic reflected her commitment to veterinary excellence and her understanding of pet owners' intense emotional bonds with their animals, featuring comfortable consultation rooms, advanced diagnostic equipment, and carefully designed spaces that minimized stress for both animals and their human companions during medical procedures. Her walls displayed veterinary school degrees from prestigious universities, board certifications in multiple veterinary specialties, and photographs of successful surgeries that had saved animals from life-threatening conditions while providing hope to devastated pet owners. But beneath Sarah's reputation for veterinary compassion lay a dangerous combination of fentanyl addiction, systematic insurance fraud, and calculated murder that had transformed her animal hospital into a criminal enterprise where healthy pets were killed for organ harvesting and suspicious pet owners met their death through veterinary drugs. "Good morning, Dr. Mitchell," said Margaret Foster, her 10 o'clock appointment, and a 69-year-old retired teacher whose 13-year-old golden retriever, Max, had been receiving ongoing treatment for what Sarah claimed was advanced kidney disease, requiring expensive dialysis and medication that had already cost over $40,000. Margaret had begun questioning the necessity of Max's treatments after consulting with other veterinarians who suggested the dog's condition might not be as serious as Sarah had diagnosed. "Good morning, Mrs. Foster," Sarah replied with the veterinary expertise and medical authority that had made her legendary among Boston's pet-owning community, who viewed her as both healer and miracle worker, capable of extending their beloved animals' lives through advanced medical interventions that other veterinarians couldn't provide. "I've reviewed Max's latest test results, and I'm concerned that his kidney function has deteriorated significantly. We need to discuss some aggressive treatment options that might extend his quality of life, though the prognosis remains guarded." Margaret had become Sarah's most dangerous client, not because of her demanding treatment expectations or her emotional attachment to her pet, but because of her growing suspicions about the legitimacy of Max's medical condition and her recent decision to seek second opinions that threatened to expose Sarah's systematic fraud and unnecessary medical procedures that generated substantial profits while harming healthy animals. What Margaret didn't know was that Sarah had been systematically killing healthy pets and murdering suspicious owners for over 3 years, using her veterinary expertise and access to controlled substances to eliminate animals for organ harvesting while silencing pet owners who discovered her fraudulent medical practices. Sarah's transformation from compassionate veterinarian to calculating killer had begun 5 years earlier, when her prescription opioid addiction had escalated from legitimate pain management following a workplace injury to daily dependency on fentanyl and other powerful narcotics that she diverted from her veterinary practice's controlled substance inventory. Her drug habit had grown to consume over $5,000 worth of veterinary medications per week, while her gambling losses at underground poker games had accumulated to over $600,000, with organized crime figures demanding immediate payment. Faced with impossible financial demands and threats of violence, Sarah had begun using her veterinary practice to commit systematic insurance fraud by misdiagnosing healthy animals with serious conditions that required expensive treatments, while simultaneously operating an illegal organ harvesting operation that sold animal tissues and organs to research laboratories and black market buyers who paid premium prices for fresh biological materials. Her criminal activities had escalated when several pet owners had begun questioning her diagnoses and had sought second opinions that threatened to expose her fraudulent medical practices. Sarah had murdered her first victim, a prominent businessman who had discovered evidence of unnecessary procedures, by injecting him with a lethal dose of veterinary barbiturates during what appeared to be a routine consultation about his dog's treatment plan. The success of her first murder had convinced Sarah that eliminating suspicious pet owners and harvesting valuable animal organs was both necessary for protecting her drug operation and extremely profitable when combined with systematic insurance fraud and medical malpractice. Over the following 3 years, Sarah had murdered 12 additional individuals using various veterinary drugs and toxic substances that took advantage of her medical knowledge, her access to controlled substances, and her victims' trust in her professional expertise and medical recommendations. Her victims had been carefully selected based on their discovery of her fraudulent practices, their valuable insurance policies, and their isolated circumstances that made their deaths easier to stage as medical emergencies or accidents. Her victims had included Dr. Robert Chen, a veterinary pathologist who had discovered evidence of systematic organ harvesting and whose coffee had been contaminated with concentrated barbiturates; Jennifer Martinez, a wealthy pet owner whose insurance investigation had revealed fraudulent claims and whose allergy medication had been replaced with lethal doses of veterinary anesthetics; and David Foster, a federal investigator who had been tracking veterinary fraud operations and whose death had been staged as an accidental exposure to veterinary chemicals during a facility inspection. "Dr. Mitchell, I need to discuss some serious concerns about suspicious pet deaths and reports of insurance fraud connected to your veterinary practice," said Detective Lisa Rodriguez of the Boston Police Department's Animal Crimes Division, as she entered the clinic carrying a warrant to inspect Sarah's facilities and interview her about suspicious activities. Detective Rodriguez specialized in investigating animal cruelty and veterinary fraud, and had developed expertise in recognizing patterns of systematic animal abuse and insurance fraud that exploited pet owners' emotional attachments and trust in veterinary professionals. Detective Rodriguez's investigation represented an existential threat to Sarah's criminal operation, as her law enforcement expertise and access to veterinary regulatory databases could expose the systematic fraud and connect her to multiple suspicious deaths of both animals and their owners. "Of course, Detective Rodriguez," Sarah replied, though she felt the familiar surge of panic and aggression that accompanied any official scrutiny of her veterinary practices by law enforcement officers who possessed the training and resources to detect evidence of animal abuse and systematic murder disguised as veterinary medical care. "Animal welfare and professional integrity are always my highest priorities, and I want to cooperate with any investigation that might help protect pets and their owners from criminal activities or unethical veterinary practices." Detective Rodriguez consulted detailed reports from animal welfare organizations and insurance fraud investigators that showed patterns of unnecessary medical procedures, suspicious pet deaths, and human fatalities that suggested systematic criminal activity rather than legitimate veterinary care or natural medical complications. "Sarah, I've been investigating reports of systematic animal abuse and insurance fraud involving your veterinary practice, and I've also identified suspicious deaths that have occurred among pet owners who were questioning your medical recommendations," Detective Rodriguez said, with the investigative precision that had made her successful in solving complex animal crime cases. 12 individuals who were clients of your veterinary practice have died under suspicious circumstances, with several of these deaths occurring immediately after the victims had expressed concerns about unnecessary treatments or had threatened to report suspected fraud to regulatory authorities. The detective's identification of the fraud patterns and her recognition of the timing correlation between client complaints and deaths confirmed Sarah's worst fears that her criminal activities had been analyzed and connected to her systematic elimination of suspicious pet owners and potential witnesses to her veterinary fraud and organ harvesting operations. Sarah's response was swift and deadly, as she realized that eliminating Detective Rodriguez was essential for protecting her criminal enterprise and preventing exposure of her systematic veterinary fraud and murder spree. Detective Rodriguez, I think there may be some misunderstanding about the complex medical decisions involved in veterinary care and the unfortunate reality that pet owners sometimes experience stress-related health problems when dealing with their animals' serious illnesses, Sarah said while discreetly reaching for a syringe containing concentrated propofol that she kept hidden in her medical supplies for emergency elimination of law enforcement threats. Perhaps we could discuss these concerns in my surgical suite, where I can demonstrate the advanced medical procedures that might explain these apparent coincidences. Veterinary medicine often involves life and death decisions that might appear suspicious to those unfamiliar with animal medical care and the emotional toll it takes on pet owners. Detective Rodriguez agreed to examine Sarah's veterinary procedures, not realizing that the veterinarian was leading her to a soundproof surgical room where previous murders had been committed and where Sarah planned to inject her with the propofol that would cause fatal respiratory depression while appearing to be a heart attack brought on by the stress of investigating disturbing animal crimes. Sarah's plan involved convincing Detective Rodriguez to examine specific surgical equipment while explaining veterinary procedures, then using her syringe to inject the propofol directly into the detective's bloodstream, causing immediate unconsciousness and death that would be attributed to the emotional trauma of investigating animal abuse rather than deliberate murder by a veterinarian protecting her criminal operations. But Sarah's carefully planned murder of the detective was about to be prevented by the unexpected arrival of federal agents who had been investigating veterinary drug diversion networks and had identified connections to her medical practice. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh of the DEA's Veterinary Crimes Division had been conducting a comprehensive investigation into controlled substance diversion and trafficking operations that exploited legitimate veterinary practices to steal and distribute drugs for human addiction and illegal sales. Agent Walsh specialized in investigating veterinary drug trafficking and had developed expertise in tracking medical professionals who abused their access to controlled substances while committing related crimes. The federal investigation had been initiated by reports from pharmaceutical distributors and veterinary licensing boards who had noticed unusual patterns of drug ordering and usage that suggested systematic diversion of controlled substances from legitimate veterinary care to illegal distribution networks and personal addiction. Agent Walsh had been conducting surveillance of Sarah's drug procurement and usage patterns and had documented evidence of systematic drug diversion, animal abuse, and suspicious patterns of client deaths that suggested her veterinary expertise was being used for organized criminal activity rather than legitimate animal medical care. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, I'm Special Agent Walsh with the DEA, she announced as she entered the surgical suite where Sarah was preparing to murder Detective Rodriguez. I have federal warrants for your arrest on charges of trafficking in controlled substances, systematic animal abuse, conspiracy to commit murder, and multiple counts of first-degree murder related to your exploitation of veterinary practice for drug trafficking and elimination of potential witnesses. Sarah's reaction to the federal agent's intervention was a combination of medical authority and desperate attempts to maintain her veterinary credibility, as she realized that law enforcement agencies at multiple levels had been investigating her drug diversion activities and had connected them to systematic animal abuse and client murders. Her carefully maintained reputation as a compassionate veterinarian had failed to protect her from comprehensive investigation by agencies with expertise in controlled substance crimes and animal welfare violations. Special Agent Walsh, There must be some serious misunderstanding about legitimate veterinary medical practice and the complex pharmaceutical requirements for providing advanced animal medical care, Sarah said frantically, while abandoning her plan to poison Detective Rodriguez and attempting to preserve some semblance of professional credibility, despite the overwhelming evidence against her criminal activities. I am a board-certified veterinarian with 16 years of experience providing compassionate medical care for Boston's most beloved companion animals. All of my veterinary practices comply with established medical and ethical standards designed to protect animal welfare while providing the highest quality medical care available. Detective Rodriguez looked absolutely stunned as she realized how close she had come to being murdered by the veterinarian she'd been investigating for animal crimes. Her veterinary fraud investigation had not only exposed Sarah's systematic animal abuse and murder operation, but it also prevented her own death at the hands of a killer who had been using veterinary medicine as cover for systematic elimination of suspicious pet owners and law enforcement threats. The comprehensive investigation that followed Sarah's arrest revealed the full scope of her criminal enterprise and the sophisticated methods she had developed to exploit veterinary expertise for systematic drug trafficking and murder. Forensic analysis of Sarah's veterinary clinic revealed extensive evidence of her drug diversion and animal abuse operations, including stockpiles of diverted controlled substances, sophisticated equipment for harvesting animal organs, and detailed records showing coordination between unnecessary medical procedures and organ sales to black market buyers. Her surgical facilities contained modified veterinary equipment for processing both animal and human victims, detailed profiles of wealthy pet owners who had been targeted for exploitation and murder, and financial records showing substantial profits from fraudulent medical procedures and organ trafficking. The investigation also uncovered Sarah's connections to organized crime figures who had been purchasing diverted veterinary drugs and harvested animal organs while providing protection for her criminal operations. Her network included corrupt pharmaceutical suppliers who had facilitated illegal drug procurement and dishonest laboratory workers who had purchased stolen animal tissues for research purposes. Most disturbing was the discovery of Sarah's detailed research into veterinary toxicology and her development of increasingly sophisticated methods for killing both animals and humans using veterinary drugs and procedures that would be virtually undetectable during routine autopsy examinations unless specifically tested for exotic veterinary compounds. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was ultimately convicted of 13 counts of first-degree murder, trafficking in controlled substances, systematic animal abuse, conspiracy to commit organized criminal enterprise activities, and numerous other charges related to her exploitation of veterinary practice for drug trafficking and elimination of potential witnesses. The conviction sent unprecedented shockwaves throughout Boston's veterinary community, prompting immediate reforms in veterinary licensing, controlled substance oversight, and pet owner protection protocols designed to protect both animals and their human companions from exploitation by trusted veterinary professionals. Several other veterinary practices and animal hospitals were investigated for similar criminal activities, resulting in enhanced oversight of veterinary drug handling and new requirements for medical documentation and ongoing monitoring that made it more difficult for criminals to exploit veterinary medicine for systematic drug diversion and murder. Detective Rodriguez and Special Agent Walsh received recognition for their collaborative investigation and became specialists in veterinary crime investigation, developing new techniques for identifying drug diversion operations and protecting pet owners from exploitation by criminal veterinary professionals. Margaret Foster and other surviving pet owners required extensive counseling and alternative veterinary care to overcome the trauma of learning that their trusted veterinarian had been systematically abusing animals and murdering pet owners while exploiting their emotional attachments to their beloved companions. The veterinary industry implemented comprehensive new safety protocols designed to protect both animals and pet owners from exploitation by unethical veterinary professionals. The case prompted comprehensive changes in veterinary regulation, including mandatory background checks for all veterinarians, enhanced oversight of controlled substance handling, real-time monitoring of veterinary procedures, and new reporting procedures for suspicious veterinary activities involving animal welfare or client safety. Sarah's conviction also led to increased cooperation between veterinary licensing boards and law enforcement agencies, investigating controlled substance crimes, with new protocols designed to identify veterinarians who might be exploiting their medical access for systematic drug trafficking while eliminating potential witnesses to their criminal activities. The veterinary and broader medical industries implemented revolutionary new safety measures, including enhanced security protocols for controlled substance storage, comprehensive animal welfare protection programs, mandatory reporting of suspicious veterinary activities, and improved training for recognizing signs of drug diversion and client endangerment in veterinary settings. 5 years after Sarah's conviction and life imprisonment, Boston's veterinary community continued to implement safeguards designed to protect both animals and pet owners from veterinarians who might abuse their positions of trust and medical authority for criminal purposes. The veterinarian who had promised to heal sick animals and provide compassionate medical care had instead used her veterinary expertise and position of trust to commit systematic drug trafficking and murder, while exploiting the sacred bond between pets and their human companions for criminal profit. However, her crimes had been thoroughly exposed and her victims had found justice through the dedication of investigators who refused to accept suspicious veterinary deaths as mere medical complications. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's deadly dose had been her final prescription for disaster, as she faced life imprisonment without possibility of parole, proving that even veterinary professionals who attempted to exploit their medical expertise for criminal gain could be identified, investigated, and brought to justice when dedicated law enforcement agencies worked together to protect innocent animals and pet owners from predatory veterinary practitioners. The veterinarian's deadly dose had become her terminal treatment of justice, serving as a lasting reminder that those entrusted with healing animals must never abuse that sacred responsibility, and that veterinary professionals who would harm the very creatures they promised to protect will ultimately face the full consequences of their betrayal of veterinary ethics and the human-animal bond. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.